All right, forecast. Now, take a look at the dollar first. Like we mentioned, right, that weekly candle not continuing lower is very suspicious, and that is not something we would want to see. So currently, Monday and Tuesday have passed where we are seeing that we're having bullish prices. Where on Tuesday we did have news supporting ID as well, and on Wednesday we also have news coming up. So today, and I do think we can actually look to continue higher as well. Now, if we want to sweep something or we actually want to continue lower, then we are likely going to see a rejection below this swing high right there today. So Wednesday would be the last day to see that sweep. And if that does not happen, which I'm currently not expecting it to happen as well, because clearly we are just almost confidently closing above it, clear expansion phase of a new bullish Vega being created as well. And at that moment in time, I do think that we are heading towards this monthly fair value gap that is sitting right there. So that is very interesting, and that could be a very nice target as well. For example, if we consolidate today and we have a nice daily fair value gap to continue higher off of that, could be very nice as well. So with that in mind, we can look at ES, NASDAQ, and YM. And now on ES and NASDAQ, I did mention that I do think we can look to potentially continue higher. Now, of course, with the dollar going higher right now, ES is not going lower convincingly. And what that leads me to think is that we might make a last push right there to sweep those highs to then continue lower right there. But I also think that if we already show signs right here of continuing lower, for example, the 4-hour value gaps that we create right there, and new 4-hour value gaps that we continue or create as well, that for me would be an indication, all right, we are definitely not creating that sweep and we are already continuing lower. So how would you approach this actually from a flow trading plan standpoint? Where if you want to approach this, you would go into the 1 hour and you would simply say, what are the fair value gap pointing towards? Well, I would argue currently the fair value gaps are pointing towards lower prices. First target right there. Next target, these lows as well. And the reason being for that is because we are not respecting bullish fair value gaps sitting right there. And we are now creating bearish fair value gaps. So those bearish fair value gaps can be used to continue lower as well. So it's reading the fair value gaps as a flow trader. On NASDAQ, let's see what we want to do. Same exact thoughts as on the S, where I could see it happen where we sweep those highs one last time and then aggressive move lower if the dollar actually wants to keep on continuing higher as well, and if NASDAQ, etc. want to continue lower overall. But if we already continue lower, for example here on the 1 hour, same thing as on the S, then I do not expect that sweep to happen. So here, reading that 1 hour value gap is very important to know what will happen tomorrow as well. Now on YM, let's see. YM, we just came into the weekly value gap, sitting right there. And again, that will give a rejection, but it likely currently, with the dollar going higher for a little bit, won't push a price higher just yet. Eventually it can do that because, of course, these highs right there, they're beautiful. They're beautiful to actually trade towards right there and take them out as liquidity. So they are beautiful highs to actually target eventually. But first, we are seeking a lower discount array right there. So this is what we have to wait for as well. On DAX, I definitely think that this swing low right there is the target currently. And potentially eventually as well, continuing lower. Now, daily fair value gap could be very interesting, but since we are already in that new day and it takes 18 hours before we actually create that daily fair value gap, 4 hour or even the 1 hour could be very interesting tomorrow or today actually in a couple of hours at 3 a.m. right there to continue lower could be very interesting as well. Australian dollar, US dollar, let's see. This is just very heavily continuing lower. Like we mentioned, right? This is just not a low that creates a bottom in the market. That's just not how bottoms form in the market right there. That's very important to understand. And again, that comes from experience, of course, as well. But eventually you'll see that as well, where the next target now, I would argue, is just the next discount rate, which is that swing low sitting right there. Now, how can we deliver there? Daily fair value potentially continuing lower as well. But First, we have 4 hour value gaps continuing lower and even 1 hour value gaps continuing lower as well, which could definitely be interesting. So we have Australian dollar news later as well on Wednesday. So I'm definitely going to add this to the short list right now. On EU, let's see, do we have something that clears up a little bit? Well, on the monthly, we have this monthly value gap, which is quite far away currently. We can potentially look to deliver there though, because there's just no clear bullish price action here on the weekly and neither on the daily. So if we want to continue lower, daily value gaps lower could be very interesting. Even 4 hour value gaps lower right there as well could be very interesting. I'm also going to add it to the short list, where I do think if the dollar can reach that monthly value gap, then we are in for quite clear and nice price action. Here on GU, we have this monthly value gap, which is a bit closer than on EU. So here on the weekly, on the daily, finding, very simply said, usual context to continue lower off of that. That could be very interesting right now. So I'm also going to add this to the short list. New Zealand dollar, US dollar. Let's see. Weekly, again, extremely similar and almost the same as Australian dollar, US dollar. So here, if we can also find or usual context to continue lower off that, could be very interesting. Where currently, I do want to mention that if the dollar is reaching for that monthly value gap, we are in for an extremely high probability week right here. And this is one of those weeks where I crawl from my cave and I finally get active in trading again, and I capitalize, take 15 trades and make loads of profit, and then I crawl back into my cave. And that is the life of a filtering process trader, where of course a flow trader is a little bit different and a little bit of a different story. But filtering process, this is one of those weeks where if things start clicking right here, and with clicking I just simply mean that if we want to reach that monthly value gap, we are indeed running this high on the dollar and not sweeping it, then that clearly indicates extremely high probability conditions, because from this high, from current price action actually, towards that monthly value gap is just where we just know that that is the next drawn liquidity. So what do we want to do? We simply want to capitalize on that, and that is extremely important to know. All right, I now want to participate in a market. I want to get involved because I do not want to miss out on those high probability conditions. Very important to understand. Of course, still sticking to the trading plan. Now, US dollar, Canadian dollar right here is running into a weekly order block. And again, yes, we can make the argument with the dollar going higher that this is likely also going higher. But do I want to add this to the short list and to the long list? Sorry, not necessarily. And the reason for that is because this simply will have the most resistance as well. So if I am already sort of filtering out the pairs here that I want to trade, not necessarily need to do it on the long list and short list, then I simply, because I have the luxury right now of selecting different pairs, I do not necessarily want to trade USD Canadian dollar right there. Then US dollar CHF, let's see. This is also very similar to USD Canadian dollar, where, again, you could argue Australian dollar, US dollar, New Zealand dollar, US dollar are also running into resistance, right? Yes, but they already came into an order block, into that order block a first time. So that order block, the way I see it, is already mitigated. It's already gone. It's already used up. There's no life left into that order block. Where USD Canadian dollar, we're coming into that order block for the first time. US dollar CHF, we're coming into that fair value for the first time. We're coming into those lows for the first time. So those are not used up. So we can still expect some kind of rejection before we actually continue higher. So this is also not something I would want to add to the long list. US dollar JPY is definitely very interesting, and with the same premise of last week, because last week we actually mentioned that the dollar is consolidating and somehow US dollar JPY is still continuing higher, which of course is not that crazy, because that just simply means that the JPY is even weaker than the dollar right now. So with the dollar being relatively quite strong right now and continuing higher, US dollar JPY is almost exploding higher. So here, this is definitely interesting for longs as well. So if we can get nice longs, it could be very interesting. Where in an ideal world, I would want to wait for Wednesday And I would love for us to eventually trade back into that daily VWAP to then continue higher off of that. I understand that might not happen. So here, a bit lower probability, because of course then you have multiple options, but still very nice. 4 hour VWAPs to continue higher off of that is also very nice, of course, and nothing wrong with that. Could be very nice. But keeping in mind that we have a daily VWAP in the making. Silver. So both silver and gold could be quite interesting overall for lower prices if the dollar does want to continue higher here. Overall, I do think those forex pairs are just quite nicer, and we can see silver and gold are just overall quite strong pairs. They are just quite strong, so it's a bit more difficult to actually take those shorts right there, because relatively seen they are just quite strong, even if the dollar is continuing higher as well, which we've also seen in 2023 quite a lot of times. But if I were to trade this, then I do quite like the look here on gold right there. 4 hour VWAP right there, going lower. Creating a lower VWAP off of that potentially to continue lower. Could be quite nice. I do quite like that. I'm going to add it to the short list. Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I still would want to see shorts off of this daily VWAP. Now, I'm not actively trading Bitcoin right there, but if I were to take a swing trade, then this would definitely be a swing trade I would potentially be quite interested in. Here you can also wait for a little bit more confirmation on the 4 hour, on the 1 hour, because you have quite some room right there, and then we continue lower. Just know again, very characteristic of Bitcoin, it consolidates, it consolidates, it consolidates until it drives you crazy and you have no patience anymore. And then all of a sudden, in the next 2 candles, you have the craziest move of your life, and then it crawls back into its cave and it consolidates, consolidates, and consolidates, and the cycle repeats again. That's Bitcoin summed up. And that is what happens over and over. And it's also by Bitcoin actively trading it. Just don't really like it. It's a lot of waiting for the actual right move when you have 1 day of actual volatility, which is just not really nice in my opinion. All right. Crude oil is not something I want to trade and don't really have anything to add on to here. It's just consolidating, which is a bit of a shame. Nifty, same story as well. Just continuing higher. Do not want to do anything. So moving on to the waiting list, we had quite a few pairs on the waiting list as well, where currently we are creating a daily VWAP higher actually on Canadian dollar JPY. So this is definitely looking interesting as well. Even 4 hour VWAPs right there continuing higher to target those highs and to target higher. It could be quite interesting, and I do really like this. So I'm going to add it to the long list. Let's actually look at the economic calendar. We do not have Canadian dollar news or JPY news. Well, we actually had Canadian dollar CPI on today, on Tuesday. For the rest, we do not have Canadian dollar JPY news, so only on Friday. So CPI for the Canadian dollar would mean, all right, then potentially today would still be tradable in my eyes. But other than that, it's just the lack of volatility for me would be an indicator that I do not want to put that high on my interest list. Euro Australian dollar. Let's see. We have those daily VWAPs higher as well. We reached that weekly VWAP, which was a very stupidly obvious target. So on the 4 hour, we just delivered into that. So currently the thing is right there, I did not get involved on that Tuesday, which also, by the looks of it, did not have any news supporting the ID. For the rest, we have Australian dollar news later today, Euro news as well. Well, we have a weekly VWAP that we're currently coming into, so that's resistance. So if anything, I would want to keep this on the waiting list and wait a little bit more to see what it actually wants to do. Euro JPY, let's see. So here we had that first candle potentially rejecting lower. Now we are respecting this daily VWAP right there, continuing higher off of that. Could be interesting, but I would want a little bit more clear signs, because again, since we have the luxury of having quite potentially high probability pairs right now, I want to be extremely picky about the other pairs, of course. So Euro JPY right here, it is still sweeping this high potentially, so I still want to wait right there. Euro New Zealand dollar, never or create a daily VWAP right there. Other than that, it almost is reaching that high, which we talked about. So, or you were to be awake right now and capitalize on that potential last move. We don't really have news supporting the ID until later today. So This is still going to be on my waiting list right there. And looking at GBP Canadian dollar, let's look at the weekly fair value gap right there, which acts as a breakaway gap potentially, of course. Since we have no daily fair value gap, does it act as a breakaway gap though? That's the question, right? Where we wanted to wait. If we do want to continue higher already, then daily fair value gap higher or daily fair value gap lower. On the 4 hour, nothing super interesting. We have 4 hour fair value gap lower, which could confirm order flow going lower. If we get close to the weekly fair value gap, could be very interesting as well, but still waiting a little bit. GBP New Zealand dollar. So let's see. GBP New Zealand dollar right here has a daily fair value gap already, which could be quite interesting to look to trade off of, which we are also seeing a huge wick actually just before the daily fair value gap was created. It's quite interesting. Quite interesting. So here I would still want to wait, not super clear in my eyes. New Zealand dollar JPY as well, just this actually I'm going to remove this on the waiting list because it's clearly not respecting that, also not having bearish price action, so very 50-50, not that nice. Short list, so here there are quite some pairs that I am definitely interested in. Now, I do have to say that I really like the looks of GU right there, above EU, and the reason for that is because GU, just the month for is a little bit clearer right there, that we can actually target that. Then Australian dollar, US dollar, also very nice because the drawn liquidity is super close. Same for New Zealand dollar, US dollar right there. So a big differentiator here would also be news, where we have GBP news, US dollar news, Euro news, and Australian dollar news. So Australian dollar right there would be at the top. GU would also be at the top right there with AU. Then I would say New Zealand dollar still above EU, although I do think they're quite similar. Next to that, the lowest would be gold right there, targeting these lows. So the short list is very interesting, to be honest, very interesting. US dollar JPY I also really like, and US dollar right there, news on Wednesday, so today. So if the opportunity is there and we get multiple setups actually, then I might look to take some swing trades actually. So that could be quite interesting. Canadian dollar JPY as well, quite interesting, although the news is not really supporting the ID right here. So this is not something I'm likely going to trade. All right, perfect. Thank you.